Jett Howard, a guy that, admittedly, this is great to start things off because I'm not particularly high on Jett Howard. I might as well just say this, every player in this draft is basically 19. Every player in the first round is 19 years of age. He's a shooting guard out of Michigan. He's 6'8". He's a shooter. That's what he is. And my thing with him, I believe in him being a really strong shooter. I'm not sure what else he does, what else he can bring. So why are you higher on Jett Howard? Because he's got a pretty big range in terms of where people are mocking him and have him on these on their big boards.
So for me with Jett Howard, it's funny how the first half of the year, he was someone who very quickly shot up boards. And it was to the point where he was a pretty guaranteed lottery pick all the way up until about January. And then you saw his stock really fall off because his play fell off. His overall field goal percentage dropped. His 3-point percentage dropped. He wasn't getting to the rim nearly as capably as he could in the first part of the year. Obviously, the at-rim attempts are a contested point for his entire body of work. But first half of the year, second half of the year, really big drop-off. He was hurt that second half of the year. He injured not one of his ankles, but both of his ankles. So this man was not able to move nearly as well as he did in the first part of the year, where you talked about him as a shooter. The shooting is absolutely a main selling point, but it's not just spot up shooting. It's the versatility at which he's able to shoot the ball, right? Catch and shoot, running him off of all different kinds of actions, movements, floppies. However he needed to be utilized at Michigan. They did everything in their power to not only get him the ball to shoot, but also put him in a position as a secondary creator to make decisions on the ball, enable some of his passing ability, which he does have good vision at his size. So that's really another selling point to me, is it's the combination of shooting at his size, but also secondary playmaking potential.
I'm not going to ask you to rank these guys necessarily, but would you say that there's an argument that he is the best shooter in the class?
He's certainly up there. I do think it's a battle between a number of guys. I think for my money, I'd take Bryce Sensabaugh as the best shooter in this draft class, but he's up there with a Grady Dick. There are a few other guys we can put up there. Jordan Hawkins is certainly in that conversation. Those are my top four in terms of pure shooters in the class.
Yeah, because you're right. It's not just about, hey, can you hit catch and shoots? It's like, what can you do coming off screens? What can you do with movement? What can you do to make defenses panic whenever you're pick and popping or whatever you're doing? Like, how can you create that chaos on the defensive end by able to do multiple different things? And you're right, he can do that. And the injury thing is really interesting because we look at all he does and go, okay, well, what is there? Can you get to the rim? Can you put pressure on the defense that way? What do you do defensively? Like all that sort of stuff. But let me ask you the other part of it. Like when he gets the ball in his hands, does it have to be a shot? Can he run any pick and roll? Can he make easy reads? Can he be I want to talk about this a bit later in the show, but could there be the way that sort of a Kevin Huerter plays where he's not a point guard, but if the ball in his hands, you feel all right about it, and he's also an excellent shooter?
Absolutely. That's actually a great comparison by you, Josh, right? Somebody who at Maryland, it's funny how Kevin Huerter popped to me when he was in college. I get that his major spike in the general eye was at the combine where he was able to really light it up from a shooting perspective, but I actually got to scout Kevin in person very early on during that season in Maryland. And the biggest thing that popped to me was, he's the 6'7", 6'8" guard who he's shooting, but he's also handling the ball and making decisions, making plays for others out of pick and roll, making live dribble decisions, redirecting the ball where it needs to go. I think Jett Howard has that same level of ability. And that's part of why I'm so high on him. I think you brought up a few of the negatives that can be had, right? Is he able to get to the rim and put pressure on the rim as many times as he needs to in a game? I think that ability is there more so than people want to give it credit for, given what I saw in the first half of the year. But it is a minor concern. The rebounding to me is another concern, right? He wasn't a good rebounder for somebody his size. You'd expect that to be a strength. And then on the defensive end, I think he's perfectly fine on the ball, but off the ball, he had some awareness concerns. So that's also something that's going to need to get cleaned up when he goes to the next level.
One thing that I was going to leave till later, but I'll ask now, in terms of player comparisons, that how you, as someone who's looking at the draft all year round and is looking at this really, really in depth compared to others, how do you try and avoid the easy comparisons? By easy comparisons, I mean like white shooter to white shooter, black athlete to black athlete, or even so I'm seeing now like people in Detroit go, man, well, we don't want to pick Jarris Walker because he's just Isaiah Stewart. And I go, bro, it's just because of their hair. The only reason you're saying that is because their hair is the same. Or I had someone tell me, man, I don't want Cam Whitmore. He's another Cam Reddish. Yeah, because of his first name. It's like these things get inherently it's hard to beat that mental hang up of these comparisons, or the way we draw that skin color, hair type, hairstyle, size, school they went to. How do you try and break that out of your analysis?
I leave it specifically to what I'm looking at on the tape, right? That's how you need to do comparisons, shades of, however you go about it. I do think comparisons are an important tool, right? If you're talking with somebody in the basketball world, be it another scout, an executive, right? They're going to ask you for a comparison, because if someone's never seen a player before, that's exactly how you can illustrate what that player's game is. And that's why it needs to tie to the game, right? And that's why comparisons do get a little tricky. I can be talked into a comparison, but I can also as quickly talk myself out of it, because if there's something, if there's a physical trait, if there's a specific skill that doesn't mesh from one player to the next, then I don't want to use that comparison and just fall back on it. I want to find something that fits perfectly, or as perfectly, I should say, as I can, what I'm seeing on tape, not just some of the lazy tropes like you're talking about.